All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm so glad that you're all here. I'm Michael Ruth E. I am the program chair for the Retirees Association Program Committee. I'm very pleased to have you all here for this, what promises to be a great and informative presentation by Dr. Ruth Iskin. We have some guests that I'd like to acknowledge. The Faculty Women's Club. Anybody here? Yeah, all righty. The Westwood Women's Bruins Club. Anybody here? Okay. Of course, our friends from, our counterparts from the EA. Good job, guys. We also had some friends of Dr. Iskin and members from the LACMA docent group. Super. Judith, thanks you for showing up. She's still traveling. So today, I want to let you know that Dr. Ruth's book will be available, and she'll give more information on that, but there's a flyer here on this front table, along with our upcoming presentations. Next week we have Corey Close, the head coach of the UCLA women's basketball team, coach of the year last year, took us to the Final Four. She'll be very pleased to speak with us as part of our conversations. And there's also the EA's dinner the week after that. So if anybody is hungry and wants to hear Dion DiCarlo speak about biotechnology, come on over. There will be a giveaway at the end of the presentation, so don't go away. There's a couple of these charming sling bags. Safety and security approved clear. So we should have a raffle ticket. Anybody not have a ticket? Excellent. The front desk did great. Now, this event is being video recorded, so thank you all for your consent. But I would ask you to please kindly silence your cell phones. Do it now before we all forget. And the video will be placed on the ERRC's YouTube channel some couple of weeks from now, once we get it put together properly. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Ms. Sheila Mann, who actually brought this event to us. So she will do the introduction for Dr. Iskin. Sheila, please.
Good afternoon and welcome to you all. I'm the coordinator of the Campus Book Club. The Campus Book Club meets on the fourth Thursday of every month, January through October. And we read books selected by our members. If anyone is interested in joining our club, please see me after the lecture. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Iskin. The UCLA Emeriti Association and the Retirees Association are pleased to present art historian Dr. Ruth E. Iskin, who will discuss her book, Mary Cassatt, Between Paris and New York, The Making of a Transatlantic Legacy, published by the University of California Press. Dr. Iskin will discuss the art and life of this American-born artist who joined the Impressionist group in Paris. Dr. Iskin's book is the first comprehensive study to examine Cassatt's life, work, and legacy through the prism of a transatlantic framework. A culmination of Iskin's lifelong interest in Cassatt, the book re-envisions her in the context of her transatlantic network, friendships, exhibitions, politics, and legacy. Dr. Iskin obtained her PhD from UCLA's Department of Art History in 1998. Before completing her doctoral studies, she served as the head of UCLA Extension's Visual Arts Division. She is Professor Emerita in the Department of Arts at the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev in Israel. Dr. Iskin has published numerous essays in scholarly journals, books, and museum exhibition catalogs. Her work has been translated into 9 languages. In recent years, her work has been supported by the Center for the Study of the Visual Arts at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the Terra Foundation for American Art, and the French National Institute for Art History in Paris. I am now pleased to introduce Dr. Ruth Iskin.
Good afternoon. It's great to see such a wonderful and large audience interested in the subject of Mary Cassatt. And it's a real pleasure to be back at UCLA, where I worked at UCLA Extension for 17 years, and then spent another 7 years getting my PhD in the Art History Department. So I want to thank Sheila Mann and Michael Heafy for organizing this event and allowing us allowing me to speak to you today. And thank you all for coming. So the UCLA bookstore was actually going to be here so that anyone who wanted to could acquire the book. I borrowed this book from one of the wonderful people who came here. But I did bring some leaflets, which are on the table over there. And if you get the code from the leaflet, you'll get 30% reduction from the UC Press. You'd have to go to the internet site, the website of the UC Press, put in this code, and you'll be able to get the 30% discount. If anybody brought the book today, I'll be very happy to sign it at the end. So let me give this back to you. Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you. So, my goal in this book, can you hear me okay in the back? Yes. My goal was to re-envision Cassatt's life, career, work, and legacy through her transatlantic network of friendships, exhibitions, and politics. So during Cassatt's time, the transatlantic world was characterized by the movement of goods, including art and people, artists, collectors, and dealers. This was a period marked by a growing transatlantic art market, where wealthy Americans traveled to Paris annually. The 1911 caricature, The Magnet, as you see here, illustrates the massive importation of European art and artifacts to the United States, highlighting the influence of American wealth. Cassatt was the foremost art advisor to Americans collecting modern French art in the second half of the 19th century. Yet, creating private collections was not what really interested her. Rather, she wanted these collections to eventually reach American museums. She was committed to her homeland and was determined to enrich its museums. American museums, like the Metropolitan Museum and all the other big museums, were only founded in the 1870s. And Cassatt had left a little bit before that for Europe. And she, like other artists who wanted to get their art education and become professional artists, had to go to Europe at the time to study art. Because the way you studied art at the time was to go to see collections with old masters' work, study the old masters, and copy them. So if you didn't have old masters in the United States, you had to go to Europe. And she wanted to enable artists of the next generation after her not to have to do it, and to be able to stay in their homeland to study art. So she was very dedicated to finding wealthy American collectors, mentor them, convince them to create collections, and convince them that they should eventually give those collections to museums, and she succeeded. So therefore, she agreed to be the art advisor only to Americans, and only to those Americans that she was pretty sure would send the art they acquired in Europe across the Atlantic. So although Cassatt lived in France for most of her adult life, from the age of 30 when she settled in Paris, she depended on her American network of friends, colleagues, and art collectors throughout her life. Her network included American men and women, collectors, leading businessmen and their wives, professional women, including suffrage supporters, artists, dealers, curators, and a woman architect. At the time, there weren't yet women architects in the United States. She was one of the first, Theodore Pope, whom you see here. This is Theodore Pope. This is Sarah Choate Sears, an artist, a collector, a patron of art in Boston. Louisine Habermeyer, who we'll talk about in a moment. Watson Forbes, an art critic. James Stillman, a friend of Cassatt during her later years. Mr. and Mrs. Habermeyer, the daughter of Mrs. Sears. And finally, the curator, whose name will come back to me in a moment. Sarah Hallowell, that was her name, Sarah Hallowell. And this is a selection of some of her closest friends and professional contacts, but of course she had many other friends in America. So most significantly within Cassatt's transatlantic network was her lifelong friendship with Louisine Habermeyer and with Henry O. Habermeyer, whom she met in 1889 and was friends with and advised on art collecting until 1907, when he died prematurely and unexpectedly. But she continued to advise Louisine Habermeyer through the early 1920s. Cassatt's work with the Habermeyers enabled her to be highly involved in building a world-class art collection that was bequested to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It also nurtured her connection with her homeland and served as her ongoing source of personal and professional support. And I'll talk a little bit about their friendship. Cassatt, who was 11 years older than Louisine Habermeyer, met her in 1874, the year she settled in Paris, after spending several years of traveling in Europe to study art and look at the old masters. For the young, still unmarried Louisine, her name was Louisine Elder at the time, Cassatt became a role model. Louisine admired Cassatt for being an active, cultured woman who was well-traveled, had a sharp mind, knew how to navigate Paris, and possessed great knowledge and enthusiasm for art. Cassatt mentored Louisine, taking her to art exhibitions, theater, or the opera. Cassatt already admired Courbet and Manet. Now she discovered Edgar Degas' art. She saw it in a window of an art supply store in Paris because he did not yet have a gallery that represented him to give him an art exhibition in a gallery. He, like other young beginning artists, was showing his artwork in the window of an art supply store. So Cassatt convinced Louisine to buy this pastel that I'm showing you on the left, called Ballet Rehearsal, which he made in 1874. Louisine wrote in her memoir that she really didn't understand this work, she didn't know what she was doing, but Cassatt was so forceful about you should buy this pastel that she did. It was Cassatt's first time of acting as an art advisor to an American. It was Louisine's first time buying an artwork. It was an auspicious beginning for what would become, years later, the renowned Habermeyer collection. So Cassatt first urged Louisine to work for suffrage in 1908, a year after Mr. Habermeyer died. Louisine's 3 children had grown up by then, and she needed a new purpose in life. She continued to collect with Cassatt's advice, but she became a dedicated suffrage activist and a leading suffragist in New York City. In 1915, Louisine organized a museum-scale exhibition featuring Cassatt, Degas, and some old masters. Some were from her own collection and some were lent by other collectors. It was shown at the New York Knoedler Gallery. It was time to proceed a referendum on women's suffrage in New York, serving as a public show of support for suffrage, generating publicity and raising funds for the New York campaign. Although Cassatt strongly supported suffrage, this was the only time she actively participated in a public act of support for it. Many of Cassatt's friends in the elite American circles who collected her and Degas' art were anti-suffragists. They refused to lend their artwork to the exhibition. Some of them even refused to set foot at the exhibition because it supported suffrage. I was fortunate to find these 2 photographs that you see here. They're at the Getty. They show an installation of Cassatt's artworks, or some of her artworks, in this show. And since these particular photographs had not been seen before by other scholars, I was able to identify some additional works by Cassatt that we didn't know were included in the show, and to create a better understanding of the exhibition overall. So among Cassatt's works in this exhibition was her pastel portrait of Louisine Habermeyer, made in 1895-96. Cassatt depicted the 41-year-old Habermeyer from a close viewpoint, taking up the entire space of the picture, leaving no room for a domestic interior to contain her. Cassatt lends Havemeyer a grand presence through her voluminous dress and her puffed sleeves, which were very fashionable during the 1890s. Havemeyer has a commanding presence in this portrait. This is emphasized by her firm grip of the closed fan pressed against her dress, which evokes an authoritative presence. Cassatt transforms this closed fan into a symbol of power, resembling a baton or a royal scepter. And as you can see, this contrasts markedly with how Impressionist artists, including Cassatt, whose work from 1879 you see on the right, typically portrayed women delicately handling a closed or open fan in scenes set in theaters or opera houses. So this is Louisine Havemeyer campaigning with the torch of liberty on the left and lecturing to men who were the ones who had the vote and who could grant it to women on one of her travels on the campaign for suffrage. When Louisine died at the age of 78 in January 1929, the New York branch of the National Women's Party commemorated her on the cover of the party's publication, Equal Rights. And the photograph you see that they used, she was about 60 years old in it. The fact that Cassatt and Louisine shared the commitment to suffrage and women's equality was fundamental to their friendship. And now I'd like to move to talk a little bit about Cassatt's friendship with Edgar Degas. So soon after she settled in Paris, Cassatt discovered Degas and admired him greatly immediately. Think about how much audacity it took on her part as a young artist to see the work of another fairly young artist. Degas was about 10 years older than Cassatt, in an art supply shop and decide that this was very important art. So a few years after she saw his art, she met him in 1877 when a mutual friend brought Degas to her studio and invited her to join the Impressionist group. She did that with great enthusiasm. Cassatt and Degas became close friends and colleagues who admired each other's artworks and exchanged artworks. This counteracts the frequent emphasis on Degas' help to Cassatt. Sometimes she's erroneously referred to as his pupil, but she was Degas' peer, not his protégé. Their friendship was important to both. When Cassatt met Degas in 1977, she was no longer an art student, and her artwork had already been accepted by the Paris Salon 6 times. Cassatt and Degas were colleagues from the start. Moreover, Cassatt made a most important contribution to Degas' career by championing his artwork to American collectors. This ensured that he became well known in the United States and was well represented in American private collections and then in American museums. Due to Cassatt's influence, the Havemeyer collection eventually included the largest number of Degas art in any collection. The Havemeyer bequest to the Met Museum included approximately 60 Degas works in various media, including the 14-year-old dancer whom you see standing on the left, a complete set of his 70 small bronze sculptures, of which you see 2 examples. And of course, a lot of paintings and pastels. Through Cassatt's role as art advisor to the Havemeyers and other Americans, she played an important role in advancing Degas' reputation in the United States. And now I'd like to move to talk about a subject that is very well known in Cassatt's work, which is her representation of motherhood, mothers and children. So Cassatt is primarily known for painting middle-class mothers with their babies, toddlers, or young children, which depict their warm relationships. This is the case even in works like the Chicago Art Institute work on the right-hand side that depict the mother or caretaker performing mundane childcare activities such as washing, combing hair, nursing, feeding, or reading to the child. During the late 20th century, feminist art historians interpreted Cassatt's portrayal of motherhood, first by saying it was a secularization of the Madonna and child theme, and then by seeing Cassatt's focus on mothers and children in domestic environments as resulting from social constraints that limited women's access to urban spaces such as boulevards, bars, cafes, and brothels, all topics depicted by her male colleagues. I offer a different interpretation. I point out that Cassatt's emphasis on women's roles as mothers was entirely aligned with the stance of suffragists during her time. Excuse me 1 minute. Suffragists embraced their role as mothers and argued that this made them eligible for the vote. Being mothers enabled them to contribute not only to the domestic sphere, but also to the public realm of work outside of the home, including politics. Cassatt was a suffragist herself, who rejected the limitations of the separate spheres. As a professional artist, she was actively involved in the art world, showcasing her work in exhibitions, selling it, having it discussed in newspapers and journals by critics. Cassatt depicted the important role of mothers, in my view, not to support the anti-suffrage campaign that women should remain exclusively within the domestic sphere, but rather as part of the suffragist quest for new freedoms. To understand the meaning of Cassatt's work, we need to situate it in the context of this fierce ideological battle between the suffragists and anti-suffragists of her time. So to show you that I'm relying on what was actually happening during this period, I brought this one example of a 1915 article in The Woman Voter that argued, quote, "The home is a woman's creation, a place she cherishes, not a prison from which she wishes to escape. Government today has become more and more the organization of women's sphere. Women's sphere is and always has been the care of children, health, morals, and a place where woman works. Today, government largely controls these things. Therefore, women ask a voice in the government." And this very argument was made in a propaganda poster for suffrage by Rose O'Neill called "Give Mother the Vote," made in 1915. This suffragist argument we see in the poster, "Give Mother the Vote." The poster features the typical characters of Rose O'Neill that she called the Cupids. The Cupids was named after Cupids. Marching in a row, one of them holds up a yellow flag, the official color of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, as the Cupids demand that their mothers vote. Quote, "Our food, our health, our play, our homes, our schools, our work are all regulated by men's vote. Think it over, give mother the vote," end quote. And now I'll show two anti-suffrage images. The anti-suffragists asserted that they were the only true mothers and wives. Give me 1 second to organize these pages. So the anti-suffragists argued that if a woman voted and became active outside of the home, she would neglect her family, causing her children and husband to suffer greatly. French and American propaganda images typically depicted domestic chaos and portrayed a, oh, I'm sorry, we have to get the images back. Here we go. They portrayed the husband and children as victims of mothers stepping out of their homes to vote or attend the feminist congress. This was a common theme in anti-suffrage propaganda in various countries. Here, in these American examples, we see two images that stigmatized women who supported suffrage as abandoning their duties, neglecting their children, victimizing their husbands. As the anti-suffrage propaganda poster, the suffragette Madonna shows so clearly, the abandoned husband is a martyred victim. A halo formed by the yellow plate around his head, behind his head, sanctified this white middle-class father for ably, if reluctantly, fulfilling the mother's role by feeding the doll-like baby with a milk bottle. So when we consider the fierce debate on motherhood in the suffrage and anti-suffrage campaigns of Cassatt's time, we can understand Cassatt's paintings of mothers caring for their children in a new light. Thus, Cassatt depicted the subject of mothers and children in support of the fight for women's quest for new freedoms, rather than as an acquiescence to old restrictions. Cassatt, along with the suffragists, believed that besides being mothers, women should also have the option to be active outside of the home, pursue a career, education if they wished, vote, and become active in politics. And now I'd like to move to a second theme in her work of how she depicted mature and older women. And this is a subject matter that has not been recognized as one of Cassatt's in earlier Cassatt literature. So how did I discover it? First of all, I saw in one of Cassatt's letters that I read about 250 unpublished Cassatt letters, or 90% of them were unpublished, and learned so much from them. These letters were to Ruth E, her friend, in which she wrote with a candidness of writing a diary. And after Cassatt did that portrait of Louisine that I showed earlier, and here it is again, and as I said before, Louisine was 41 years old, Cassatt made this comment that caught my attention. She wrote to her friend, "I succeeded in this portrait, but," quote, "I did not come near your maturity," end quote. She wished she could do her portrait as, quote, "a splendid old woman." Cassatt's comment shows that she valued maturation of character and aging in women as most important. Whereas, as we know, when we have our portrait painted or taken as a photograph, we would like to look as young as possible. But Cassatt actually valued maturity and aging in women. It gave them character, as we will see in a moment. So here's a selection of some of Cassatt's depictions of older women, and I'll discuss a few of them in more detail. But this comment that I just quoted led me to recognize that Cassatt portrayed some older women, although the subject has been overlooked in her oeuvre. As I analyzed these portraits, I explored them in the historical context of the predominant discourses on older women during Cassatt's time. And through that, I discovered how she innovated the representation of women's aging. In 1885, at her 70th birthday celebration, the suffrage leader, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, delivered a speech titled "The Pleasures of Age," in which she proclaimed 50, not 15, is the heyday of a woman's life. She argued that after their children are grown, women gain a new freedom to pursue intellectual interests, friendships, enjoyment of the arts, and so forth. Stanton appended the prevailing paradigm of loss and decline that governed women's aging, according to which, after their childbearing years, women lost their femininity, sexual appeal, and value to society. Sociologist Susan Picard refers to this as the decline ideology. This ideology is visible in Rodin's sculpture, modeled in 1884 to 85, at the same time as Stanton wrote The Pleasures of Age. Initially, it was titled The Old Woman. This sculpture was later referred to as The Old Courtesan, or She Who Was Once the Helmet Maker's Beautiful Wife. These titles, like the sculpture itself, evoke the loss of beauty and sexual appeal that the old woman had possessed during her earlier life. The naked, withering body is savaged by decline. Her stooped head, shriveled, emaciated body, sagging breasts, all lack vitality. It is a body whose life force has been extinguished. Rodin's sculpture shows a woman's old age as shocking, frightening, and repulsive. As Picard writes, quote, "Fear of aging is one of the key vehicles through which society acts upon us from within and is a powerful mode of social control," end quote. So caricatures like this one by Honoré Daumier, his 1844 image in Le Charivari, expressed a misogynistic ideology of a woman's aging. It ridicules older women for trespassing into the masculine territory of intellectual activity, reading, writing, and seeking knowledge. The accompanying text, which you see on the screen, mocks her age. After she explained that she's writing a novel and thus needs to consult old authors, a male voice denigrates her age, saying, "Old authors, heavens, she should have consulted them while they were alive, for she must have been their contemporary." By contrast, Cassatt's portrait of her mother reading Le Figaro in 1878 normalizes the positive image of an older middle-class woman reading the newspaper, while most of the artworks by Cassatt's Impressionist colleagues show only men reading the newspaper. Cassatt emphasizes the 62-year-old woman's interest in the outside world to which the newspaper connects her. It is part of leading a vital life. Mrs. Cassatt's focused, alert reading, highlighted by her spectacle, shows her serious demeanor. So the quintessential thinker is male, as in Rodin's famous sculpture of a vital masculine male body, a pensive figure with a hand supporting his chin. It is rare to see a depiction of a woman in a thinker's pose, as we see here, because it negates the prevalent characteristic of the image of a woman as primarily to be looked at. It is thus significant that Cassatt portrayed older women in a thinking pose. A print from around 1890 shows her, and this is on the right, shows her 74-year-old mother with her index finger on her cheek, signifying her as a thinking individual, suggesting wisdom of old age. Cassatt's portrait of her friend, Mrs. John Whittemore, emphasizes the high social class and confidence of the older woman on the left. At 59, Mrs. Whittemore, the wife of an industrialist and art collector, is dressed in the fashion of the day with those large puffed sleeves. She's portrayed as a robust, vigorous American lady in the thinker's pose. The title of the painting, Portrait of a Grand Lady, highlights Mrs. Whittemore's prominent status in her community. This is actually one of the best-known works by Mary Cassatt. It's been discussed a lot in art history, but the whole issue of age has been overlooked in those discussions. So this is considered a masterpiece by Cassatt, Lady at a Tea Table from 1883 to 85. It portrays Mary Dickinson Riddle, the first cousin of Cassatt's mother, as a dignified upper-class American older lady, not old lady. Although, unlike other portrayals of older women by Cassatt, this painting has attracted considerable discussion. As I mentioned, the issue of age is not being discussed. Mrs. Riddle, who is in her mid-60s when Cassatt portrayed her, sits upright. A proud woman, she makes a point of maintaining her body's erect posture despite her age. Cassatt, as we know from her comment portraying Louisine Havemeyer, cherished painting an older woman such as this one precisely because of her age marked by her life experience and her upper-class status, which shaped her character. The gilded blue and white Chinese porcelain service featured in detail in the front was a gift by Mrs. Riddle's daughter, Anna Riddle Scott, to the Cassatt family. And Cassatt painted this portrait as an appreciation of that gift. Although gatherings around tea were an upper-class social ritual, there's no sense of Mrs. Riddle's interaction with her guests. She's a lone sovereign, governing the occasion with the authority of her class and age. Compare this realistic rather than flattering portrait to a typical society portrait by Sargent. Sargent's portrait of Constance Gladys Gray shows the femininity, elegance, and elaborate evening attire of the gray-haired 45-year-old aristocrat. Note, however, that by depicting the femininity of a woman whose signs of age are visible, he counteracts the negative stereotype of the older woman as having lost her femininity. As Caroline Field notes, the women's rights movement elevated, publicized, and circulated new kinds of images of older women. They represented older women suffragists as national leaders in numerous photographs. And in this 1900 portrait, Susan Eddy painted Susan B. Anthony on her 80th birthday, capturing a moment in a spectacular public celebration when 80 children lined up to deliver flowers to Anthony. Bowing her head slightly, the dignified white-haired Anthony is depicted as the grandmother of the nation. In contrast to common negative representations of women's aging, feminist and professional women like Cassatt were experiencing getting older as a positive phase in their lives. Cassatt herself said that on her 70th birthday, she wrote to Havemeyer, quote, "Old age, whereas when faculty is unimpaired, is the best part of life," end quote. So for professional women like Cassatt, getting older was a period of increased knowledge, confidence, and recognition. So, I'll talk briefly about Cassatt Legacy. Since she was born in the United States, American museums have claimed her as an American artist. She herself never considered herself an American artist, and certainly not an American Impressionist. She was very firm about her artistic identity being that of an Impressionist belonging to the French group of Impressionists. But she was also very strongly identified with being an American. She never gave up her American citizenship. And as I said before, she dedicated a lot of energy to advising Americans to buy art and ship it to the United States in order to enrich the museums. So I discovered that there are two narratives about Cassatt's legacy. One is in American museums, such as this at the Metropolitan, where we see Cassatt shown, in this case, I must say, an exception to the American habit of showing Cassatt in American galleries, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. If you go there, you see a very wonderful collection of Mary Cassatt works, and they're actually shown in the context of the French Impressionists. That is an exception. The Philadelphia Museum of Art has found an interesting solution. They don't show Cassatt in either the European or the American galleries, but in both. So here in the European galleries, they show Cassatt next to Edgar Degas. These two paintings are in that installation show. Here they show Cassatt's early painting from 1873 next to Manet's Bon Book from the same year. But here they show Cassatt's Driving, a painting which she made at the height of her Impressionist phase in the American galleries. Cassatt is also well represented in museums in Paris. She's at the Petit Palais, she's in the Bibliothèque Nationale, the INHL Library, and the Louvre transferred Cassatt's artwork along with other artworks to the Musée d'Orsay when it opened in 1986. This painting by Cassatt is in the Petit Palais, shown in the context of the French Impressionists. These are prints in the Bibliothèque Nationale of the INHL libraries. They have big collections of prints. If you go to the Musée d'Orsay Impressionist galleries, many of you I'm sure have been there, you will find this one painting, oil painting by Mary Cassatt in those Impressionist galleries. But on one occasion, the Musée d'Orsay also showed the pastels they have along with Degas' sculpture. They cannot show the pastels generally because pastel is a fragile medium, and they would be ruined if they were shown all the time by the light. So I want to remind you, as probably most of you know, that we have two wonderful paintings by Cassatt, mother and child, in Los Angeles. One is at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. It's currently not on view, so I'm not sure in what context they would normally show it. The other one is at the Huntington, and it's shown in their American galleries. So I'd like to, before I finish, just mention that next year, 26, is Cassatt's centennial. She died in 1926. And that centennial will be marked by quite a few museums in the United States and also in Paris. The Musée d'Orsay is initiating, Musée d'Orsay in Paris is initiating a big retrospective of Cassatt's art. It will travel to Boston and to London. The Chicago Art Institute is also creating an exhibition of Cassatt's work. The National Gallery of Art is going to show a big selection of its huge Cassatt collection of paintings and prints. And a few other museums will no doubt do shows. The Philadelphia Museum of Art has already done a big retrospective for the centennial. It just ended. It then went to the Legion of Honor, and it went then to Honolulu, where it's still now in the Museum of Art in Honolulu on view, and I just went there to give some lectures on Cassatt as a result. So I hope that with all those exhibitions and their catalogs and research, and with my book, we will see some new kind of understandings of Cassatt art in the coming years. And thank you so much for coming here today. Now I'll be glad to answer any questions or hear any comments that you might have. So please don't be shy. Yes?
I just wanted to congratulate you on such a wonderful...
Wait, you'll get the mic.
I just wanted to congratulate you on such a wonderful book. I could not put it down. And the details about all the things you spoke about today, I recommend it to everyone, and the beautiful paintings. And just wanted to ask you, in your research, did you see anything that you wanted to research further, that you would have liked to said more about her?
Yes, actually, I want to write a few articles on Mary Cassatt because after the book, I'm left with some more ideas, and certainly I devoted chapter 5, which is about Cassatt's art, part of it to this topic of the older woman. And as I look at more and more artists in the 19th century, I realized that this topic could be developed much more, even beyond Cassatt's art. So I'm thinking that I might write an article that deals with the topic of how older women were represented in art, fine art, including Cassatt, but also talking more about Sargent and talking more about Whistler's mother, and talking more about quite a few other artists, men and women artists, to develop that topic further. There are also a few other topics that I might write a little bit more about. So at the moment, I'm not planning another book. I think this will be my last book, but I will write some more articles and maybe some essays from museum catalogs. And as I mentioned before, if you do want to get the book, you can get it for 30% discount if you take that leaflet and use the code. So any other questions or comments? Yes?
Thank you. I wanted to know if her mother went with her to Paris.
Yes. Her mother and her father and her sister moved to Paris after Cassatt settled there. A few years after she settled there, they moved to Paris. Her father was already retired. Her sister was sick, so after a few years she died. But Cassatt and her sister were very close, and she depicted her in some of her artworks.
And did she have any connection at all, or any interface with Alice Utopus or
No.
Gertrude?
So actually, her friend Sears, Chud Sears, who was living in Paris for a while and was a very good friend of Cassatt, the Bostonian Sears, took her to one of Stein's gatherings. Sears was more avant-garde, you know. Sears was an artist who also was a photographer, doing photography as an art. And she had a more open mind to new art. Cassatt, you know, was very much on the cutting edge in the 1870s and the 1880s. But in the early 20th century, she was no longer on the cutting edge. And when she went with Sears to the Stein Salon, she was horrified. She wrote, "I've never seen such a terrible collection of art and of people." She was used to the elite American circles, and all of a sudden this was the bohemian crowd. There were a lot of Jews there too. There were people from all walks of life, and then she also didn't like the work of Picasso and Matisse. It just seemed horrible to her. This happens to a lot of artists. You know, they're on the cutting edge during a certain decade or decades, and then after that, they're no longer understanding so much what the very young new artists are doing. It's already beyond them. This is very normal.
She's a real period piece.
Sorry?
She's a real period piece, I think.
Okay, any more comments or questions? You're welcome to ask anything. Yes?
Here we are.
How do we determine women of older age?
It's a great topic to discuss, because in the 19th century, a woman at age 45 was already considered, you know, older age, like you saw in this nice Sargent portrait of the aristocrat. She was 45 years old, she already had gray hair, after the childbearing years. So that would mean already early 40s. A woman was already becoming old in those days. I think today's maybe a little bit different. You know, we extended it through buttocks and all kinds of exercise and healthy lifestyle. There are a lot of women who look very young in their 40s or even 50s. So I'm not sure what we would say today. When is a woman considered an older woman? Who knows? But in the 19th century, it was very clear. But thank you for that question. It's a really good one. It shows us how much the historically specific moment is important to understand art and ideas, because things change, and if we just bring our contemporary way of looking and thinking to art that was made in the 19th century, we don't really get the meanings that were the ones for it in the 19th century when that art was made and also collected and received. So, if there are no more questions, I will thank you again for coming.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iskin. Now, hang on to find those tickets. Where are those tickets? It's that time. Yes, sir. The giveaways are on their way.